Before the modern world became clean, bright, warm, and carefully sealed away from dirt, life was much closer to the ground, closer to mud, closer to smoke, closer to animals, fire, water, weather, and the slow, stubborn mess of ordinary survival. Tonight, we are going to step quietly into that older world. Not into the world of great kings, shining armor, or famous battles, but into the ordinary world of medieval life. A world of narrow streets, smoky rooms, damp clothing, crowded markets, wooden bowls, rough blankets, and cold stone floors. A world where keeping clean was not impossible, but it was never simple. Imagine, for a moment, that you are waking before sunrise in a small medieval house. The room is dim. The air is cool. The first light of morning has not yet reached the little gaps in the shutters. Somewhere nearby, a fire has been burning low through the night, leaving a thin smell of smoke in the air. It clings to the beams above you, to the wool of your blanket, to the rough cloth of your clothing, and even to your hair. There is no alarm clock, no electric light, no warm shower waiting in the next room. Only the soft crackle of old embers, the shifting of someone sleeping nearby, and the distant sound of animals beginning to stir outside. You open your eyes slowly. The bed beneath you is not soft in the way we would understand softness today. It may be filled with straw, wool, feathers if you are fortunate, or something much simpler if you are not. The bedding has absorbed the smells of the house: smoke, sweat, dampness, old fabric, and the faint, earthy scent of the floor below. The floor itself is cold. It may be packed earth, rough timber, or stone. In many homes, rushes or straw might be scattered across it to make the surface warmer and more comfortable. But those rushes do not stay fresh forever. They collect dust, crumbs, mud from boots, ash from the hearth, and all the little traces of daily life that fall and settle over time. You sit up carefully. The room is shared. Privacy is rare. Other people may be sleeping near you: family members, children, servants, apprentices, or guests. The house is not divided into clean, separate spaces in the modern way. Cooking, sleeping, working, storing food, repairing tools, and caring for animals may all happen close together. The medieval home is not a sealed box against the outside world. It breathes. It leaks. It lets in cold air, smoke, insects, dust, and the smells of the street. The line between indoors and outdoors is much thinner than it is today. And outside, the morning is already beginning. A rooster calls from somewhere in the yard. A pig grunts near a doorway. Hooves strike the ground in the lane beyond the house. A cartwheel groans slowly through the mud. Someone coughs. Someone opens a shutter. Somewhere, water is being carried in a bucket, sloshing softly with each step. There is no tap to turn. No clean bathroom sink. No tiled floor that can be wiped dry in seconds. Water must be fetched, carried, stored, guarded, and used carefully. Every bowl of water has weight. Every wash takes effort. Every piece of clothing that needs cleaning becomes a task for hands, backs, fire, tubs, soap, and time. And this is one of the most important things to understand about medieval cleanliness. People were not simply dirty because they did not care. They cared. They noticed smells. They washed their hands. They rinsed their faces. They cleaned clothing when they could. They swept floors, changed rushes, used herbs, visited bathhouses in some towns, and developed routines that made sense within the world they lived in. But their world worked against them. The streets were muddy. Animals moved through the same spaces as people. Waste was difficult to remove. Smoke filled homes. Clothing was hard to wash. Soap was not always cheap. Hot water required fuel. Clean water required labor. And the idea of invisible germs was still far away from ordinary understanding. So medieval life was not dirty because people were foolish. It was dirty because dirt was everywhere. It was in the street beneath your shoes. It was in the smoke above your head. It was in the straw on the floor, the wool on your back, the wooden bowl in your hands, and the crowded market where food, animals, people, rainwater, and waste all met in the same narrow space. To live in the Middle Ages was to live in constant negotiation with the physical world. You could sweep the floor, but the mud returned. You could wash your hands, but the bucket emptied. You could air out the bedding, but smoke settled again by nightfall. You could clean the street outside your door, but the next cart, horse, pig, or storm would undo your work. And yet, life continued. Bread was baked. Water was carried. Children ran through lanes. Candles were lit. Markets opened. Church bells rang. Clothing dried slowly near the fire. People laughed, worked, prayed, complained, rested, and slept in a world that smelled of earth, wood smoke, wool, animals, ale, sweat, rain, and human life. Tonight, we will move slowly through that world. We will begin inside the medieval home, where smoke gathered in the rafters and the floor remembered everything that crossed it. Then we will step outside into the lane, where mud could swallow a shoe. Pigs wandered near doorways, and the morning smells of a town rose quietly into the air. We will visit markets and kitchens where food was prepared with simple tools and where flies, smoke, salt, and wooden tables were part of ordinary life. We will look at washing, bathing, laundry, and the many ways people tried to keep themselves respectable, even in a world without modern plumbing. We will walk through castles, villages, streets, yards, and sleeping rooms. We will notice the small details, the roughness of linen, the weight of a water bucket, the smell of damp wool, the glow of a candle, the coldness of stone, and the soft sound of rain falling into a muddy lane. There will be no need to hurry. This is not a story of battles. It is not a story of kings. It is the quieter history of ordinary people living close to the earth. So, settle in. Let the modern world become distant for a while. Let the lights soften. Let the room around you grow still. And imagine yourself standing at the doorway of a small medieval house, early in the morning, with smoke behind you, mud before you, and an entire day of old, earthy, uncomfortable life waiting just outside. This is Bedtime History, and tonight we are exploring why medieval life was dirtier than you think. Chapter 1. Morning Smoke. The first thing that truly warms the medieval morning is not the sun. It is fire. Long before the day has fully arrived, before the lane outside has filled with footsteps, carts, voices, and animals, the heart of the house is already waiting in the ashes. The hearth sits low and quiet, holding the last orange memory of the night before. A few dark pieces of wood remain, half-burned and fragile, resting beneath a layer of gray ash. When someone leans close and breathes gently into the embers, a faint glow returns. The darkness inside the room begins to pulse with a small, living light. A little dry straw is added. Then a few thin sticks. Then heavier wood, placed carefully, one piece at a time. At first, the fire only whispers. It snaps softly, sending a thin curl of smoke upward into the dimness of the room. Then it catches. The flame grows brighter. Shadows tremble along the walls. The faces of the people inside the house slowly become visible in the warm, uneven light. But with the warmth comes smoke. It rises in pale, twisting ribbons, drifting toward the rafters, gathering under the roof, finding its way through gaps in the thatch, cracks in the timber, or a simple opening above the fire. In some homes there may be a chimney, but not always a good one. In poorer houses, smoke does not disappear quickly. It stays. It wanders. It clings. It settles into everything. The beams above are darkened by years of it. The roof holds the smell of it. The walls have absorbed it. The blankets carry it. The clothing carries it. Even the hair and skin of the people inside the room carry a faint, smoky trace from the fires that have burned there day after day, season after season. To us, it might feel uncomfortable almost immediately. Our eyes would water. Our throats might tighten. We might cough and reach for a window. But in a medieval home, smoke was part of life. It was not pleasant exactly, but it was familiar. It meant warmth. It meant cooked food. It meant light in winter. It meant survival when the air outside was cold enough to make fingers ache and breath turn white. The smoke was annoying. The smoke was dirty. But the fire was necessary. Without it, the house would be colder, darker, and far less livable. And so, each morning, the room slowly fills with the complicated comfort of burning wood. Imagine standing there barefoot or in simple shoes, wrapped in wool or linen, feeling the cold floor beneath you and the heat of the hearth in front of you. One side of your body begins to warm, while the other still feels the damp chill of the night. The house does not heat evenly. There are no radiators hidden along the walls, no warm air moving through vents, no gentle thermostat keeping every corner the same. There is only the fire. Near the hearth, the air is warmer. A few steps away, it is cold again. In the corners, the darkness still holds the night. Near the door, a draught slips in. Around the shutters, thin lines of pale morning air push through the gaps. The house breathes in the weather outside, and it breathes out smoke from within. This is part of what made medieval life feel so different from modern life. The inside world was never fully separate from the outside world. Rain, cold, mud, dust, smoke, insects, and smells all passed through the borders of the home. A medieval house was shelter, but it was not a sealed, polished, climate-controlled space. It was a living structure made from wood, earth, straw, stone, clay, and whatever materials the people could afford or find nearby. Its walls protected you, but they did not isolate you. In winter, smoke and dampness could become constant companions. Wet clothing might hang near the fire, drying slowly and releasing the smell of wool, rain, sweat, and earth. Boots left near the doorway brought in mud from the lane. Tools leaned against the wall. Food might be stored nearby. A pot hung over the flames, darkened by use, slowly warming whatever simple meal could be made that morning. The smoke moved around all of it. It curled over the pot. It passed through hanging cloth. It rose around baskets, stools, bedding, and sleeping bodies. In the rafters, meat or herbs might be drying, protected somewhat by the smoke itself. Smoke could help preserve food. It could discourage insects. It could make the beams above feel almost seasoned by time. But it also left soot. It left residue. It made the air heavy. It turned the house into a place where cleanliness was always partial, always temporary. You could sweep. You could shake out cloth. You could open a shutter. But as long as the fire burned, smoke would return. And the fire had to burn. It boiled water. It cooked porridge. It warmed hands. It softened the dark hours of the morning. It gave people a place to gather before the work of the day pulled them outside. A child might sit close to it, still half asleep, watching sparks rise and vanish. Someone older might stir a pot with slow, practiced movements. Another person might crouch near the hearth, feeding the flames with small pieces of wood, careful not to waste fuel. Fuel was not just something that appeared. It had to be gathered, cut, carried, stored, bought, or earned. Every piece of wood mattered. Every flame had a cost. Even warmth required labor. The smell inside the house becomes richer as the morning grows. Smoke from the fire mixes with the damp smell of the floor, the sourness of old straw, the wool of clothing, the breath of sleeping people, the remains of last night's meal, and the faint scent of animals nearby. In some houses, animals might be kept close, especially in colder seasons or poorer households. Their warmth was useful. Their presence was ordinary. But they brought their own smells, their own dirt, their own sounds in the early morning. A goat shifting in a nearby space. A chicken scratching somewhere it should not. A dog turning in a corner. The house is not a silent museum room. It is crowded with life. And life leaves traces. Ash falls around the hearth. Soot marks the stones. Smoke darkens the roof. Straw on the floor traps bits of food, dust, and mud. Clothing absorbs the air of the room. Hair smells faintly of wood smoke. Hands become marked by ash, grease, flour, soil, and work before the day has even properly begun. To a modern person, this might seem almost impossible to relax in. But for the people who lived there, it was normal. The smell of smoke meant home. The sight of the hearth meant morning. The blackened beams above were not a failure of housekeeping, but a record of years of meals, winters, births, storms, conversations, and ordinary survival. In a world without electric light, the fire was also the beginning of visibility. Before the sun rose high enough, the room existed in dim pieces. A bowl here, a bench there, a hanging cloak, a wooden chest, a sleeping figure, a little smoke moving through the air like a gray ribbon. Then the fire grew. The room appeared. Not all at once, but slowly, warmly, unevenly. The hearth made the house feel alive. And yet, that same fire also made the house dirtier. This is the quiet contradiction of medieval comfort. The thing that kept you alive also filled your home with soot. The thing that cooked your food also darkened your walls. The thing that warmed your hands also stung your eyes. The thing that brought the family together also made the air thick and stale. There was no perfect solution, only balance. Open the shutters too much, and the cold enters. Keep everything closed, and the smoke lingers. Let the fire die, and the house grows dark and freezing. Feed it too much, and fuel disappears. So the medieval morning begins with small choices: a little more wood, a little more air, a little more patience, a pot placed over the flames, a cloak pulled tighter, a cough in the corner, a hand wiping smoke from tired eyes. Outside, the world is waking, but inside, the house is still wrapped in the old smell of night and fire. A thin beam of morning light finally slips through a crack in the shutter. It catches the smoke hanging in the room, turning it silver for a moment. Dust floats with it. Tiny particles drift slowly through the air, visible only when the light finds them. The room is not clean, but it is warm enough. And in the Middle Ages, warm enough often mattered more than clean. The people inside begin to move. Someone reaches for a bucket. Someone adjusts a pot. Someone pulls on clothing that already smells of yesterday. Someone opens the door, and for a brief moment, cold outdoor air rushes in, sharp and damp and full of the muddy lane beyond. The smoke stirs. The fire snaps. The morning has begun. And before we step outside into the mud, before we follow the lane toward the smells of the town, we stay here a little longer, in the smoky half-light of the medieval home. Because this is where the dirt of the day begins, not with filth in some dramatic sense, not with laziness, not with carelessness, but with the simple reality of living close to fire, close to fuel, close to cold, close to animals, close to the earth, and close to all the small traces that ordinary life leaves behind. The smoke rises again, soft and gray. The room grows warmer, and the medieval day continues, slowly, under a darkened roof that remembers every fire that came before. Chapter 2. The Floor Beneath You. Before we leave the medieval house and step into the lane outside, it is worth looking down, not at a polished wooden floor, not at smooth tiles, not at a clean carpet, soft and carefully vacuumed, but at the surface beneath your feet. The medieval floor was one of the quietest, most ordinary places where dirt gathered. It was always there, beneath every step, beneath every chore, beneath the feet of children, workers, animals, visitors, and family members, moving through the house from morning until night. In some homes, the floor might be made of beaten earth. Hard-packed, uneven, and cold, it carried the memory of weather and work. In other homes, there might be wooden boards, worn by years of footsteps, or stone floors in wealthier buildings, cold and heavy beneath the body. But for many ordinary people, the floor was not something cleanly separated from the outside world. It was close to the earth, and the earth came inside. Mud came in on shoes and boots. Dust came in through cracks and open doors. Ash fell from the hearth. Straw broke into small pieces. Crumbs dropped from bread. Bits of wool, thread, leaves, herbs, and dried grass settled in corners. Every day, the floor collected the small evidence of being alive. To make the floor warmer, softer, and less bare, people might scatter rushes, straw, reeds, or other plant material across it. Freshly laid, this could make a room feel cleaner and more comfortable. It softened footsteps. It absorbed dampness. It covered the hardness of packed earth or stone. Sometimes herbs might be mixed in, adding a faint scent when crushed underfoot. For a little while, the room might smell almost fresh. Green rushes, sweet herbs, dry straw, a small attempt to make the house more pleasant. But the freshness did not last. Day after day, people walked across the same floor. They came in from the yard, from the lane, from the market, from the fields. Their shoes carried mud, animal dung, leaves, and dust. The hearth sent out ash and soot. Food was prepared nearby, bread was cut, bowls were carried, children moved carelessly. Dogs sniffed along the ground. Chickens in some places might wander too close. A pot might spill. Someone might shake out a cloak. Someone might drop scraps while eating. And the rushes beneath their feet caught all of it. They were useful, but they were not magical. They hid dirt as much as they helped manage it. A floor covered with rushes could look softer and more orderly from above, but underneath, old layers might hold crumbs, grease, dried mud, insects, and the faint, sour smell of thyme. In a well-kept home, the rushes would be changed. The floor would be swept. The old material would be taken away and replaced. But fresh rushes required labor and access. Not every household could keep them perfectly clean all the time. Cleanliness depended on money. It depended on time. It depended on season. It depended on weather. It depended on whether the household had enough hands to spare for cleaning when there was food to cook, animals to tend, fields to work, water to carry, clothes to mend, and fires to keep alive. A medieval floor was not ignored because people did not care. It was simply part of a world where dirt returned faster than it could be removed. Imagine the morning after rain. Outside, the lane is soft and brown. Cartwheels have cut grooves into the mud. Hooves have pressed deep marks into the ground. Pigs have rooted near doorways. People have crossed from house to yard, from yard to well, from well to stable, and back again. Now the door opens. Someone steps inside. The floor receives the mud. At first, it is just a little, a wet footprint near the entrance. Then another, a smear of earth across straw. A dark clump drying near the wall. As the morning continues, the mud dries, breaks apart, and becomes dust. Later, feet carry that dust farther into the house. It mixes with ash from the hearth. It settles on cloth. It catches in the folds of clothing. It lies quietly in corners until someone sweeps it away. And then, later, more comes in. This is the rhythm of dirt. Not dramatic, not sudden, just constant. A little carried in, a little dropped, a little blown through the cracks, a little falling from the fire, a little shaken from clothing, a little left by animals, a little created by the house itself as straw breaks, wood wears down, clay crumbles, and soot falls from above. If you lived there, you would learn where to step. You would know the warmer places near the hearth, the colder places near the door, the corner where ash gathers, the place where the floor dips slightly, the area where dampness lingers after rain. You would know the floor not as a design choice, but as part of the daily landscape of home. Perhaps in the morning, someone sweeps with a bundle of twigs or a rough broom. The movement is slow and repetitive. Dust lifts into the light. Straw shifts. Ash gathers in little gray lines. Crumbs and scraps are pushed toward the doorway. The old rushes are shaken, turned, or removed, depending on the household and the day. For a moment, the room feels clearer. The air moves. The floor looks more orderly. But cleaning a medieval floor was not the same as making it modern clean. There was no vacuum to pull dust from every crack, no disinfectant, no sealed rubbish bag, no washing machine for the cloths, no running water to rinse away every stain. Cleaning meant managing the visible mess, reducing smells, keeping pests away, making the space usable, respectable, and livable. It meant doing enough, and enough was shaped by the world around you. The hearth itself added to the problem. Fire gave warmth, but ash was always near. A small gust could scatter it. A careless movement could send gray powder into the room. A log shifted, and tiny black fragments fell. A pot moved, and soot marked the hands that touched it. Ash could be useful, of course. It could be part of cleaning, soap making, and other household tasks. But around the hearth, it also became one more layer of matter on the floor. It mixed with straw, mud, and dust until the inside of the home felt inseparable from the materials that sustained it. Wood, earth, smoke, water, ash, straw. These were not background details. They were the texture of daily life. Even in wealthier homes where floors might be better made and more carefully maintained, the problem of dirt did not disappear. Stone floors were easier to sweep than earth, but they were cold. Wooden floors could be more comfortable, but cracks held dust and spilled liquids. In castles and manor houses, rushes might still be used in halls. Servants might clean regularly, but the size of the household, the number of visitors, the movement of animals, the presence of fires, and the difficulty of carrying water meant that perfect cleanliness remained far away. A great hall could be impressive. It could have banners, benches, long tables, carved wood, and the glow of many candles. But under the tables, beneath the feet of guests, there might still be rushes catching spilled ale, breadcrumbs, grease, bones, mud, and wax. Servants could clear, sweep, and replace them, but feasting and living left marks. The floor remembered. It remembered every meal, every wet boot, every dropped crust, every spark from the fire, every sleeping dog, every child running through with muddy feet, every winter day when the door opened and the cold came in with the dirt. And in poorer homes, the floor might be even more intimate. People worked close to it. Children played on it. Tools were repaired near it. Food might be prepared only a short distance above it. Bedding might be laid near it. A person could wake, cook, eat, work, and sleep all within a few steps of the same surface. The idea of separate rooms for separate kinds of cleanliness was limited. There was not always a clean bedroom, a separate kitchen, a tiled bathroom, a utility room, and an entryway designed to catch dirt before it entered the home. There was one shared space, or a few shared spaces, and life overlapped within them. This overlap made medieval dirt different from modern dirt. Today, dirt often feels like something that has entered the wrong place. Mud belongs outside. Smoke belongs in a chimney or not at all. Animals belong in certain spaces. Waste is sealed, removed, hidden. Food preparation happens on washable surfaces. Floors are expected to be clean enough for bare feet, children, pets, and sometimes even dropped food. But in the medieval home, the categories were softer. Outside came inside. Work mixed with sleep. Food mixed with smoke. animals mixed with people, warmth mixed with soot, comfort mixed with straw, and the floor held these mixtures quietly. If you stood there in the morning, you might feel the rushes bend under your feet. Some pieces would be dry and brittle, others might be damp from yesterday's weather. A faint scent of herbs might rise where they were still fresh. Beneath that, there would be earth, ash, old smoke, and the heavy smell of people living closely together. A broom passes over the floor again. The movement is patient. Soft scratching, straw shifting, dust rising. A gray line of ash pushed toward the doorway. Outside, the lane waits with more mud. Inside, the floor becomes just clean enough for the day to begin. And this is important. Medieval people did not always live in the worst version of their world. They tried to improve it. They swept. They replaced old materials. They used plants and scents. They organized their homes. They knew when a space felt foul, stale, or unpleasant. They did what they could with the tools, materials, and time available to them. But what they could do was limited. The house was always porous. The fire was always smoky. The street was always near. Water was always heavy. Labor was always needed. And so the floor beneath them became a kind of quiet symbol of medieval life itself. Practical, earthy, imperfect, repeatedly cleaned, repeatedly dirtied, and never completely separate from the world outside. Soon, we will open the door and step into that outside world. We will leave the smoke-darkened beams and the rush-covered floor. We will pass through the doorway where mud has dried and broken into dust. We will feel the colder air of the lane and hear the town beginning to wake. But for one more moment, we remain inside. The fire glows behind us. The broom rests against the wall. Fresh light touches the floor in a pale stripe. And beneath that light, dust and straw lie quietly together, waiting for the first footsteps of the day. Chapter 3. Medieval Streets. Now, at last, the door opens. The smoky warmth of the house remains behind you, and the colder air of the lane touches your face. It is damp, sharp, and full of morning. For a moment, the difference is almost refreshing. The smoke thins. The room behind you grows darker as you step away from the firelight. Ahead, the medieval street waits quietly, already marked by the movements of the day. It is not a street as we might imagine one now. There is no smooth pavement stretching cleanly between rows of houses. No painted lines, no drains hidden neatly beneath the road. No bins waiting to be emptied by a truck that arrives before sunrise. Instead, the lane is narrow, uneven, and alive with mud. The ground beneath your feet has been shaped by wheels, hooves, rain, boots, and time. In dry weather, it may become dusty, broken, and rough. In wet weather, it turns soft and sticky. Cartwheels carve deep tracks. People step carefully along the edges, trying to avoid the worst places. Animals leave hoof prints. Puddles gather in low spots, reflecting the pale morning sky in dull brown water. You take one step, then another. The mud pulls slightly at your shoes. It is not dramatic. It is simply there. A constant part of movement. A reminder that the medieval town is built close to the earth, and the earth does not stay outside the home. Every walk through the lane brings part of the street back with you. The houses lean close together. Some are timber-framed with upper floors that seem to push out above the street. Others are lower, rougher, patched with clay, wood, and thatch. Shutters open slowly. A face appears. A voice calls out. Somewhere, a door creaks. Somewhere else, a bucket is set down with a dull, wooden sound. The street begins to wake. A woman crosses the lane with water. A boy carries kindling. A man leads a tired horse past the doorway. Chickens scatter from his path. A pig noses through the mud near a wall, searching for anything edible. A dog slips between two houses and disappears. In this world, animals are not separate from daily life. They are part of the street. Pigs, chickens, horses, oxen, dogs, cats, goats, and geese might all move through or near the spaces where people walk, work, and eat. They are useful, valuable, ordinary, and messy. They bring food, labor, warmth, eggs, milk, transport, and trade. They also bring smells, noise, dung, fleas, and more dirt underfoot. A horse passes, and the lane changes. Hooves press into the wet ground. A wheel follows, cutting through the mud. The cart groans under its load. Straw shifts. A man mutters softly to the animal. The sound fades, but the marks remain behind. Everything leaves a trace. A dropped handful of straw. A splash of dirty water. A crust of bread. A strip of leather. A pile of dung. A broken feather. A smear of ash. The street is a place of passage, but also a place of collection. What falls there may remain for some time. Some waste will be cleared. Some will be trampled. Some will dry, crumble, and turn to dust. Some will be washed into another corner by the next rain. Some will be eaten by animals. Some will simply become part of the surface of the town. People knew this was unpleasant. They were not blind to it. Medieval towns often had rules about waste, animals, blocked streets, and dirty trades. There were efforts to keep certain areas cleaner, to move rubbish, to control butchers, tanners, brewers, and others whose work produced strong smells or mess. But rules are one thing. A crowded town in bad weather is another. There are only so many hands, only so many carts, only so much time. And the dirt keeps returning. Imagine walking beside a row of houses after rain. Water drips from roofs. The lane is dark with wet earth. A gutter or open channel may carry water along the side, but it does not look clean. It holds whatever the street has given it. Mud, straw, refuse, animal waste, scraps from houses, and the slow movement of the day all mixed together. You step around it. So does everyone else. This careful stepping becomes a skill. You learn the raised places. You know which side of the lane floods first. You know where the butcher's shop leaves the ground unpleasant. You know where animals gather. You know which doorway has the worst puddle. You know how to walk with a basket, a bucket, or a bundle without slipping. The medieval body is trained by the street. It knows mud. It knows cold. It knows uneven ground. It knows the sound of hooves behind it and the need to move aside. There is a rhythm to the lane now. More doors open, more smoke rises from roofs. More voices fill the air. A bell rings somewhere in the distance. A cart turns slowly into a wider street. Someone laughs. Someone argues. Someone sweeps the area outside a doorway, pushing straw, dust, and dried mud into a small heap. The act of sweeping is small, but important. It is a way of claiming a little order from a disorderly world. The street may never be fully clean, but the space just outside the door can be made better. A person can clear a path, push away the worst of the mess, scatter fresh straw, scrape mud from a threshold, empty a bucket somewhere more suitable or less noticeable. These actions do not transform the town, but they make life possible. This is how cleanliness often worked in medieval life, not as perfection, as management, not as total removal, as daily negotiation. The dirt was always larger than the household, larger than the person, larger than the morning's effort. It came from weather, animals, work, food, trade, waste, and the materials of life itself. Yet people still fought it in small, repeated ways. A broom outside a door. A bucket carried to the edge of the lane. Fresh rushes on a floor. A washed face. A rinsed bowl. A cloak shaken in the morning air. These small actions were not meaningless. They were the difference between a home that felt bearable and one that felt foul, between a street that could be crossed and one that trapped every step, between ordinary discomfort and real danger. As you continue down the lane, the town opens slowly around you. The smell of smoke follows from the houses. The scent of damp wood rises from walls and carts. Mud clings to shoes. Animals move through the edges of sight. The morning grows brighter, but the street remains brown, uneven, and marked by all who pass through it. Behind you, the house you left is still breathing smoke through its roof. Ahead, the market waits, and with it comes a richer, stronger mixture of smells. Bread, fish, meat, ale, sweat, leather, dung, smoke, wet wool, and the many human traces of a medieval town beginning its day. Chapter 4. The Smell of the Town. The medieval town does not wake quietly for long. As the morning stretches on, the lanes grow fuller, and with every new person, animal, cart, and open doorway, the air becomes more layered. It is no longer just the smell of one house, one hearth, one floor, or one muddy lane. It is the smell of the entire town rising together. And the town smells of everything. Wood smoke drifts from rooftops in thin gray lines. Bread begins to bake somewhere nearby, giving the air a warm, comforting scent for a moment. Then the wind shifts, and something sharper arrives. Fish laid out for sale, damp wool, horse sweat, old straw, leather, wet earth, ale from a tavern doorway, the sour smell of spilled drink, the heavy smell of animals, the metallic scent near a butcher's stall. The air is never empty. It carries the work of the town. A medieval market is a place of food, trade, conversation, shouting, bargaining, and movement. It is also a place where smells gather quickly. Meat is cut and displayed. Fish is brought in from rivers, ponds, or the coast, if the town is lucky enough to receive it. Cheese, onions, herbs, bread, eggs, poultry, beans, cabbages, and ale all have their own presence. Nothing is wrapped in plastic. Nothing is chilled behind glass. Nothing is sealed away from the street. Food sits in the same world as dust, flies, smoke, hands, breath, weather, and animals passing close by. This does not mean people were careless with food. They knew when something smelled wrong. They understood freshness in practical ways. They salted, smoked, dried, boiled, baked, and preserved. They inspected with the senses they had: sight, touch, smell, taste, experience. but the boundary between food and the messy world around it was much thinner than it is today. A baker's stall might be one of the more pleasant places to pass. Bread has a soft power in any century. Warm loaves stacked close together can briefly cover the harsher smells of the street. The scent of grain, heat, crust, and yeast-like fermentation gives the morning a feeling of comfort. People gather. Coins change hands. A loaf is tucked under an arm or placed in a basket. But only a little farther away, another trade changes the air. A butcher works with practiced hands. There may be blood on wood. Scraps are set aside. Dogs watch hopefully. Flies gather if the weather is warm. The work is necessary. Meat does not arrive as a neat, silent package. It comes from animals, and animals must be killed, cut, carried, salted, cooked, or sold before they spoil. This is not hidden from life. It happens in the town. It has a smell. Nearby, fish may lie in baskets or on boards, shining in the weak light. Fresh fish can smell clean and sharp, but it does not stay that way for long. The medieval market depends on speed, season, weather, and trust. A cool morning helps. A hot afternoon does not. Customers know to look closely. Sellers know to move goods quickly. The market is alive with judgment. People smell before they buy. They touch cloth. They squeeze fruit. They watch the color of meat. They listen for the claims of sellers and decide how much to believe. All around them, the town continues to breathe. Leather workers, dyers, brewers, cooks, blacksmiths, bakers, and sellers of second-hand goods each add something to the air. Some trades are rich and warm, some are sour, some are smoky, some are almost unbearable when wind and weather are wrong. Tanning leather, for example, could be famously unpleasant. Working with hides required processes that produced powerful smells. Dyeing cloth could involve strong substances. Brewing created warmth, wet grain, fermentation, and steam. Blacksmithing brought heat, metal, coal or charcoal, sweat, and the ringing sound of tools striking iron. The smell of the town is the smell of labor. People are making things, feeding people, clothing people, repairing tools, selling animals, cooking, carrying, scraping, washing, cutting, grinding, heating, and hauling. A clean modern city often tries to hide its work. Waste goes underground. Food production is moved far away. Animals are kept outside urban life. Smoke is regulated. Workshops are separated from homes. Bad smells are treated as failures. But in the medieval town, work is close. The place where someone lives may be near the place where someone slaughters, bakes, brews, hammers, washes, or sells. The street is not just a road. It is a workshop, a market, a meeting place, a delivery route, a social space, and sometimes an unpleasant drain for the leftovers of all these activities. As you walk through it, your clothing gathers the day. A little smoke, a little food smell, a little dampness, a trace of animals, a trace of mud. Nothing remains untouched. The senses grow used to it. What would overwhelm a modern visitor might be normal to a medieval person. Not because their noses did not work, but because familiarity changes attention. The smell of one's own town becomes background. People notice changes more than constants. A newly spoiled barrel, a blocked channel, a dead animal, a house where sickness has settled, a trade working too close to a neighbor. Bad smells mattered. They were not only unpleasant, they were often believed to be connected to sickness. Long before modern germ theory, people worried about foul air, rot, corruption, and the danger of breathing in what seemed unhealthy. They may not have understood disease as we do, but they were not indifferent to filth. The town's smells told stories. Fresh bread meant work and food. Smoke meant warmth and cooking. Ale meant brewing and gathering. Dung meant animals and transport. Fish meant trade and risk. Leather meant labor. Rot meant danger. A pleasant herb near a doorway meant someone was trying to sweeten the air. A swept threshold meant someone cared about the boundary between home and street. And so, as the day grows warmer, the smells become stronger. The mud softens. The market fills. Voices rise. Carts stop and start. A horse shakes its head. A child runs past with bread. A seller calls out. A woman lifts a cloth to inspect its weave. A dog noses under a table and is pushed away. Above all this, smoke continues to drift. It links the houses together. One hearth after another. One roof after another. The whole town seems to smolder gently beneath the morning sky. There are pleasant moments here. The smell of warm bread, a bundle of herbs, fresh apples in season, rain on wood, clean linen drying in the air, the cool scent of a stone church interior when the door opens. But these moments are surrounded by stronger, rougher realities. The medieval town is not one smell, but many, and they do not stay separate. They mix in the damp air, settle into clothing, cling to hair, enter houses, and follow people through the day. To live there is to carry the town with you, just as you carry mud on your shoes and smoke in your cloak. Soon we will turn from the market and follow one of the most important tasks of the day. Water. Because before anyone can wash a face, rinse a bowl, clean a cloth, boil a meal, or scrub a stain, water has to be found, lifted, carried, and brought home by human effort. Chapter 5. Water was work. In the modern world, water is almost silent. It waits behind walls. It runs through pipes. It appears with a turn of the hand. Hot or cold, fast or slow, clean enough to drink, clean enough to bathe in, clean enough to wash dishes, clothing, floors, hands, hair, and food, all without leaving the room. Because it is so easy, it becomes almost invisible. But in the medieval world, water had weight. Before it could clean anything, it had to be carried. Imagine leaving the house with an empty bucket in one hand, or two buckets balanced with effort, or a larger vessel that will be heavier on the way back. The morning is still cool, but the work begins immediately. You step through the doorway, across the threshold, into the muddy lane. The same street that brings dirt into the house must now be crossed in search of the thing that removes dirt. A well may stand nearby, or it may not. A stream may run outside the settlement. A public fountain may serve part of the town. A river may be close enough to use, though not always clean enough to trust. In some places, water sources were carefully valued and protected. In others, they were shared by many people, animals, trades, and households, all needing water for different reasons. Drinking, cooking, brewing, washing, soaking, rinsing, animals, gardens, workshops, and cleaning all competed for the same essential substance. Water was life. But it was also labor. You reach the well and wait your turn. Other people are already there. A woman with a tub, a child with a small pail, a servant from a larger house, someone rinsing a vessel, someone complaining softly about the mud. The rope creaks. A bucket descends into the darkness below. There is a pause, then the sound of water far beneath, then the slow effort of pulling it back up. Hand over hand. The rope is rough. The bucket grows heavier. Water appears at the edge of the well, dark and cold, trembling with the movement. It is poured into a vessel, and already the task has changed. Carrying an empty bucket was easy. Carrying water is not. Every step home must be careful. A full bucket pulls on the arm and shoulder. It knocks against the leg. It spills if you move too quickly. It splashes onto skirts, shoes, or the ground. If the lane is muddy, you must place each foot with attention. If someone passes with an animal, you step aside. If a cart comes through, you wait. If a child runs too close, you warn them away. By the time the water reaches the house, it has already cost time and strength. And because of that, it is not wasted. This changes everything about cleanliness. A modern person can wash hands under running water for half a minute without thinking. A medieval person may have to consider how much water is available, who carried it, whether more will be needed for cooking, whether animals must be watered, whether laundry is planned, whether someone is sick, whether the fire can heat it, and whether another trip to the well is worth the effort. Water is not simply used. It is managed. A small amount might be poured into a basin for washing hands or face. A cloth may be dipped, wrung out, and used carefully. A wooden bowl may be rinsed and wiped. A pot may be cleaned as well as possible, though grease and soot are stubborn. A floor may be dampened in places. Clothing may be soaked only when there is enough water, time, and fuel. Hot water is even more expensive in effort. It requires fire. Fire requires fuel. Fuel requires gathering, chopping, drying, buying, carrying, or storing. So, when water is heated, it is often used with purpose. For cooking, for brewing, for washing a body part, for helping with laundry, for cleaning something especially dirty. Warm water can make a task easier, but it never arrives freely. Imagine a pot placed over the hearth. The water inside warms slowly. Smoke rises around it. The fire must be watched. The pot blackens a little more with use. Someone waits, perhaps doing another task nearby, because no one can afford to spend a morning doing only one thing. Water heating is folded into the rest of life. Stirring food, mending cloth, minding children, feeding animals, sweeping ash, preparing for work. When the water is finally warm, it is valuable. A person might wash their hands before eating. They might rinse their face. They might clean a baby. They might tend to someone ill. They might scrub a stain from cloth or loosen dirt from a tool. Each use reduces the water's freshness. Clean water becomes used water. Used water may still serve another purpose before being thrown away. This reuse may sound strange now, but it made practical sense. Water had weight, so people stretched its usefulness. The relationship between water and cleanliness was also shaped by trust. Not all water was equally safe. A clear stream might look inviting and still carry danger. A river near a town could receive waste from people, animals, and trades upstream. A well could be prized if it was known to be good. Rainwater might be collected. Beer and ale were often part of daily life, not simply because people avoided all water, but because brewing, boiling, and fermentation could make drinks more dependable in certain contexts. The medieval world judged water through experience. How does it smell? How does it taste? Where did it come from? Who else uses it? Has someone become sick after drinking from it? Is it moving or stagnant? Does it look clear or foul? These questions mattered, even without modern chemistry or microbiology. People understood that some water was better than other water. They understood that stagnant, foul-smelling water was dangerous. They simply did not have our tools for seeing invisible causes. So the work of water continued, day after day. Buckets filled, buckets carried, basins used, pots heated, cloths rinsed, hands washed, floors wiped, animals watered, and always more water was needed. This is why medieval dirt could be so persistent. It was not only about knowing that something was dirty, it was about having enough water, enough fuel, enough soap, enough time, and enough strength to deal with it. A muddy shoe is simple to understand, but cleaning it still takes resources. A smoky cloth can be washed, but washing it takes effort. A body can be rinsed, but rinsing requires privacy, warmth, water, and time. Cleanliness was not just a habit, it was an economy of effort. A person might choose to wash hands and face, but not the whole body. To rinse the visible dirt from a garment, but not fully launder it. To clean the bowl needed for the next meal, but leave the floor for later. To save hot water for someone sick, a newborn child, an important occasion, or a task that truly required it. These choices were not always careless. Often they were reasonable. As the day moves on, the bucket empties, the basin grows cloudy, the hearth dries the edges of damp cloth. Outside, the well waits for another visit. The lane is still muddy, the house is still smoky, the floor will need sweeping again. Water has helped, but it has not conquered the world. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson of this part of medieval life. Dirt was easy to collect and difficult to remove. Water could wash, rinse, soften, and refresh. But every drop had to be earned by someone's hands. So before we imagine medieval people as simply dirty, we should first imagine the walk to the well, the rope, the bucket, the cold weight of water, the careful steps home through mud, the fire needed to warm it, the many tasks waiting for the same small supply. Only then can we understand why cleanliness in the Middle Ages was not absent, but limited, not unknown, but difficult, not ignored, but shaped by the heavy daily work of bringing water into a world that was always ready to become dirty again. Chapter 6. People did wash. It is easy to imagine the Middle Ages as a world where nobody washed. A world of unwashed faces, filthy hands, foul clothing, and people who simply accepted dirt as part of life. But that picture is too simple. And, like many simple pictures of the past, it misses something important. Medieval people did wash. They washed their hands, they washed their faces, they rinsed their mouths, they combed their hair, they cleaned clothing when they could, they valued pleasant smells, they understood that dirt, bad breath, greasy hands, and foul clothing could bring shame, disgust, or suspicion. Cleanliness mattered socially, practically, and sometimes spiritually. The difference was not that they failed to notice dirt. The difference was that washing took more effort. It required water. It required time. It required warmth, privacy, fuel, soap, cloth, basins, tubs, and the right moment in the day. And so washing was often smaller, more local, more practical, and more occasional than it is in the modern world. Imagine the morning basin. A shallow bowl of water sits near the hearth or on a small wooden surface. The water may be cold, unless someone has taken the trouble to warm it. A person bends over it, cupping water in their hands and lifting it to the face. The gesture is quiet and familiar. Water touches the eyes, cheeks, mouth, and forehead. A cloth may be used to wipe away sleep, sweat, smoke, and dust from the night before. It is not a shower. It is not a bath. But it is washing. The face feels fresher, the eyes clearer. The skin wakes to the cold. A little water runs down the neck and disappears into the collar of a linen garment. Hands are next. Hands matter. They touch food, tools, animals, money, doors, soil, cloth, firewood, children, bowls, and the bodies of the sick. They become dirty quickly, and people knew this. Before meals, washing hands could be expected, especially in more formal or wealthy settings. In religious life, washing carried meaning as well. Clean hands could be part of manners, ritual, and respect. A servant might bring water before a meal in a higher status household. A guest might rinse their hands. A towel might be offered. The gesture was not only about hygiene in the modern sense, it was about order, about civility, about showing that one understood how to behave. Even in poorer homes, hands could be rinsed when water was available. Not every time a modern person would wash them, perhaps, and not always with soap, but enough that we should not imagine everyone eating with hands completely ignored by care. The medieval body was not forgotten. It was managed. Hair could be combed. Beards could be trimmed. Teeth might be cleaned in simple ways with cloth, herbs, or other materials. Nails could be cut. Linen underclothes could help absorb sweat and protect outer garments. People changed what they could, washed what they could, and cared about how they appeared to others. But there were limits everywhere. Soap existed, but it was not always cheap. Bathing existed, but access varied. Laundry existed, but it was hard work. Hot water existed, but fuel was costly. Privacy existed for some, but not for all. And full-body bathing required more than desire. It required preparation. Think of what a bath means without plumbing. First, water must be brought. Not a bowl, not a cup, a large amount. Enough to fill a tub, or at least enough for a meaningful wash. That water must be carried from a well, river, fountain, or other source. Then it may need heating. Pots must be placed over a fire. The fire must be fed. The water warms slowly. More water is carried. More is heated. The tub is prepared. The room must be warm enough to undress. Towels or cloths must be ready. The used water must later be emptied. A bath is not a quick pause. It is an event. For the wealthy, it could be more comfortable. A household with servants could manage the labor. A wooden tub could be brought. Water could be heated in larger quantities. Herbs might be added. Clean linen might be prepared. The bath could become a moment of comfort, pleasure, health, and status. For ordinary people, bathing might be simpler and less frequent. A partial wash could be far more practical. Face, hands, feet, underarms, and visible skin could be cleaned without requiring the full labor of a tub. Public bathhouses also existed in many medieval towns, especially in certain periods and places. They offered bathing as a social and practical service. People could go there to wash, relax, and sometimes eat or socialize. But bathhouses were not equally available everywhere, and over time, attitudes toward them changed. Concerns about morality, disease, cost, and reputation could affect how they were seen. Still, their existence reminds us of something important. Medieval people were not opposed to being clean. They simply lived in a world where cleanliness was uneven. A town might have bathhouses, while a rural village did not. A wealthy merchant might bathe comfortably, while a poor laborer washed in pieces. A monk might follow regular washing customs, while a field worker returned home covered in mud and sweat. A noble household might offer hand-washing rituals before meals, while a crowded cottage had to save water for cooking. Cleanliness was real, but it depended heavily on class, place, season, and circumstance. Season mattered more than we often imagine. In summer, bodies sweated more. Work in fields, kitchens, workshops, and markets could leave clothing and skin damp and strong-smelling. Water might be easier to tolerate cold, but warm weather could also make smells worse. In winter, washing was harder. A cold room, icy water, and wet skin could be deeply unpleasant and even risky if one could not warm up afterward. Clothing dried slowly. Smoke filled the house more often. People stayed indoors longer, close to fire, animals, and one another. So winter dirt was different from summer dirt. Summer brought sweat, flies, and ripening smells. Winter brought smoke, damp wool, crowded rooms, and stale air. Both seasons shaped how and when people washed. A person might rinse hands and face daily when possible, but bathe the whole body only occasionally. Feet might be washed after long travel. Hair might be cleaned less often than the face. Linen underclothes might be changed more often than outer wool garments. A stain might be scrubbed from a sleeve while the whole garment waited for a proper washing day. The body was cared for in practical pieces. Piece by piece, task by task, moment by moment. And there was also the matter of scent. People used herbs, flowers, scented waters, smoke, and clean linen to improve the smell of bodies and rooms. Sweet smells mattered because bad smells were unpleasant and often associated with sickness or moral disorder. A pleasant scent could suggest care, refinement, and health. A foul smell could suggest neglect, poverty, disease, or dangerous air. Imagine a person preparing for church, market, or a visit. They wash their face. They smooth their hair. They adjust their linen. They shake out their cloak. They perhaps use herbs or a small scented item if they have access to it. This is not modern hygiene, but it is not indifference. It is presentation. It is dignity. It is the human desire to feel acceptable in the eyes of others. Yet the medieval world always pushes back. The lane outside is muddy. The fire inside is smoky. The water is heavy. The clothing is difficult to clean. The work of the day begins again. A clean face in the morning may be touched by ash before breakfast. Clean hands may become dirty feeding animals, carrying wood, kneading dough, or lifting a bucket. Fresh linen may absorb sweat by noon. Hair may smell of smoke again by evening. The body is washed, then returned to the world that soils it. And so medieval cleanliness was not a permanent state. It was a temporary victory, a small clearing in the constant weather of dirt. This makes the people of the past feel more human, not less. They tried. They adapted. They cared. They lived in bodies that needed tending, in homes that needed sweeping, in towns that needed clearing, with tools far simpler than ours and labor far heavier than we usually imagine. So, when we picture medieval life, we should not picture a world where everyone was proudly filthy. We should picture a person bending over a basin in the early morning, washing smoke from their face with cold water. A servant pouring water over a guest's hands before a meal. A child having mud wiped from their cheeks. A worker rinsing sweat from the neck after a hot day. A woman scrubbing linen until her fingers ache. A household heating water with precious fuel. A town bathhouse steaming in the gray afternoon light. A body made cleaner for a while, then sent back into a smoky, muddy, crowded world. People did wash, but the world did not stay washed. And that is where much of medieval dirt truly lived. Not in the absence of effort, but in the endless return of the things people were trying to clean away. Chapter 7. Clothes and Laundry. If the medieval floor remembered every footstep, then medieval clothing remembered every day. Clothing carried the world with it. Smoke from the hearth, mud from the lane, sweat from labor, rain from the fields, dust from the road, grease from cooking, straw from bedding, the smell of animals, markets, workshops, and crowded rooms. A garment was not just something worn on the body. It was a soft record of where the body had been. And cleaning it was not simple. In the modern world, laundry is often a machine task. Clothing is gathered, sorted, placed into a drum, covered with detergent, and cleaned with the push of a button. Water arrives by pipe. The machine turns by itself. Dirty water drains away unseen. A dryer or heated room finishes the work. The whole process can happen while the person doing it is somewhere else. In the medieval world, laundry was physical. It used arms, backs, water, fire, ash, soap, stones, tubs, paddles, and time. A piece of clothing was valuable. Cloth took labor to make. Wool had to be sheared, cleaned, spun, woven, cut, and sewn. Linen came from flax, which required its own long chain of work. Clothing was mended, reused, altered, passed down, patched, and cared for, because replacing it was not easy. This meant people did not treat clothing as disposable. They protected it. They layered it. They cleaned parts of it. They used undergarments to shield outer garments from the body. A linen shift or shirt worn close to the skin could absorb sweat and body oils. This inner layer could be washed more often than heavier outer clothing. Woolen gowns, tunics, cloaks, and outer garments were harder to launder. They were heavy when wet. They dried slowly. They could shrink, stretch, or lose shape if treated poorly. They absorbed smoke and dampness, but washing them too often was not always practical. So medieval cleanliness in clothing often began with layers. The layer closest to the skin took much of the dirt. The outer layer lasted longer. This was not foolish. It was practical. Imagine a person undressing at the end of a long day. Their outer garment smells of smoke and weather. The linen beneath smells more of the body. The cuffs are stained. The hem is marked with mud. A sleeve has a spot of grease. The collar has darkened from skin and sweat. The cloth is not ruined, but it is no longer fresh. What happens next depends on wealth, household labor, season, and need. A garment might be brushed. A hem might be scraped. A stain might be treated. Linen might be soaked. Clothing might be aired outside. A cloak might be hung near the fire to dry, though this adds more smoke. A shirt might be washed in a tub or at a river bank. Laundry, when done properly, was a serious task. First came water, often a great deal of it, then soaking, then rubbing, beating, kneading, or scrubbing. Soap might be used if available. Ash and lye could be involved in cleaning processes. Cloth might be boiled or steeped. Stains had to be worked by hand. Dirt did not politely leave. It had to be forced out. Picture a washing place near a stream. The air is cool. Women, servants, or household workers bend over cloth, hands red from cold water and effort. Wet linen slaps against stone or wood. Sleeves are twisted. Water runs cloudy from the fabric. A basket waits nearby. Someone talks while working. Someone laughs. Someone complains about the weather. A child watches from the bank. The work is repetitive. Dip, rub, beat, rinse, twist, dip again. A large piece of wet cloth becomes heavy very quickly. Lifting it from the water takes strength. Wringing it takes both hands. Carrying it home takes more. Then it must dry. Drying is its own problem. In warm, dry weather, clothing can be spread or hung in the open air. The sun and wind help. A clean breeze is a gift. But in wet seasons, drying becomes slow and frustrating. Damp cloth hanging indoors adds moisture to the room. Near the hearth, it dries faster but gathers smoke. Outside, it may be rained on, splashed, stolen, or dirtied again. A freshly washed garment could return to the house already carrying the smell of smoke by evening. The work of cleaning and the work of living were always interfering with each other. This is why clothing could seem dirty by modern standards, even when it was cared for. Smoke was unavoidable. Mud was common. Sweat came with labor. Wool held the smells. Linen wrinkled and stained. Outer garments were too valuable and difficult to wash constantly. A person might look reasonably tidy within medieval expectations while still smelling strongly of the world they lived in. And medieval people did have expectations. Clothing signaled status, occupation, morality, and respectability. Dirty or torn clothing could mark poverty, hard labor, neglect, or misfortune. Clean linen was valued. White or bright cloth required effort. Fine fabrics showed wealth partly because they were difficult to obtain and maintain. A person who appeared clean, ordered, and well-dressed communicated something powerful. They had resources. They had discipline. They had help. Because laundry was not just a private chore. It was part of social life. To be clean required labor, and often someone else's labor. The cleaner the clothing, the more invisible work stood behind it. A wealthy household might have servants washing, drying, brushing, mending, and storing garments. A poor household might have to fit laundry between cooking, childcare, field work, market trips, animal care, and all the other demands of survival. When time was short, clothing might be patched before it was fully cleaned. A visible stain might be dealt with before a deeper smell. A shirt might be rinsed while heavier garments waited. Cleanliness had priorities. What touches the skin? What others can see? What is needed tomorrow? What smells worst? What can dry in time? What can be spared from work long enough to wash? The body, the weather, and the wardrobe all had to be negotiated. Imagine a winter evening. A wool cloak hangs near the hearth, damp from rain. Steam rises faintly from it. The room smells of wet wool, wood smoke, and old ash. A linen garment has been washed and now hangs from a line, slowly stiffening as it dries in the uneven heat. Boots sit near the doorway, still marked with mud. Someone rubs at a stain by firelight, patient but tired. The clothing is cleaner than it was, but not clean in the modern sense. Smoke touches it again. Dust settles. A child brushes past. A dog shakes itself near the door. The fire snaps, and a tiny flake of ash drifts down. The work is never finished. Still, there is comfort in cared-for clothing. A dry shirt after a damp day, a mended sleeve, a cloak shaken free of dust, fresh linen against the skin, the smell of cloth dried in sunlight, the feeling of putting on something that has been washed, even if the world will begin marking it again almost immediately. These small comforts mattered. They made life feel less rough. They restored dignity. They gave the body a little boundary against the smoke, mud, sweat, and labor of the day. So, when we imagine medieval clothing, we should not imagine endless rags without care. We should imagine garments that were precious, practical, repaired, layered, smelled of their environment, and carried the evidence of repeated use. A hem darkened by the street. A sleeve polished by work. A collar marked by skin. A cloak heavy with smoke. A linen shirt washed by tired hands. Laundry was one of the quiet battles of medieval life. A battle not against armies, but against mud, sweat, grease, smoke, and time. And, like so many household battles, it was won only briefly. By morning, the clean shirt would be worn. The cloak would return to the lane. The hem would brush the earth. The hearth would smoke again. And the clothing, like the floor, like the house, like the body, would begin collecting the world once more. Chapter 8. Food and Dirty Hands. After the house, the floor, the street, the market, the water, the washing, and the clothing, we finally arrive at one of the most ordinary and revealing parts of medieval life. Food. Food shows us how close people lived to the materials of the world. Grain, smoke, animals, soil, water, salt, wood, iron, cloth, hands, flies, and fire all came together in the making of a meal. A medieval kitchen, whether in a small cottage or a larger household, was not a clean white room with polished counters and shining appliances. It was a working place, darkened by smoke, warmed by fire, crowded with tools, and shaped by constant practical effort. The hearth was central again. The same fire that smoked the room and warmed the house also cooked the food. A pot might hang over the flames, blackened underneath from years of use. Inside, something simple might simmer. Pottage made with grains, peas, beans, vegetables, herbs, or whatever the household could afford and seasonally obtain. Bread might sit nearby. Ale or small beer might be part of the meal. Cheese, onions, salted meat, fish, eggs, or fruit might appear depending on class, season, location, and luck. Food was not always miserable. It could be warm, filling, flavorful, and comforting. But preparing it was messy. Grain had to be ground. Vegetables had to be cleaned. Fish had to be gutted. Meat had to be cut. Bones, skins, shells, feathers, peels, ashes, spilled flour, grease, and scraps all had to go somewhere. A kitchen created waste constantly. In a small home, there might be little separation between cooking, eating, sleeping, and working. A wooden table could be used for many things. A knife could serve many purposes. Bowls were made from wood, pottery, or metal. They could be wiped, rinsed, scraped, and reused. Clean water was useful, but not endless. Soap was useful, but not always abundant. A cloth used for wiping might itself become dirty quickly. Hands touched everything. Hands kneaded bread. Hands carried wood. Hands fed animals. Hands lifted buckets. Hands wiped children's faces. Hands handled coins, tools, bowls, doors, and food. This does not mean people ignored dirty hands. As we have seen, hand washing was known and practiced. But the medieval day offered so many ways for hands to become dirty again that cleanliness was always temporary. A person might rinse their hands before eating, then touch a smoky pot, then tear bread, then feed a child, then move a stool, then lift a cup, then wipe a knife. The line between clean and dirty was not fixed. It shifted with each task. Bread was one of the great anchors of the medieval diet, and bread itself tells a quieter story of dirt and effort. Grain came from fields, where soil, weather, insects, animals, storage conditions, and human labor shaped its quality. It was cut, gathered, threshed, winnowed, transported, stored, ground, mixed with water, kneaded, shaped, and baked. At every stage it passed through hands, tools, sacks, mills, tables, ovens, and air. A loaf might be precious. A loaf might be coarse. A loaf might contain grit from milling. A loaf might be dark, heavy, and filling. When warm, bread could smell wonderful, filling the room with comfort that almost made the smoke and mud disappear for a moment. But even bread lived in the same world as everything else. It sat on wooden boards. It was carried in baskets. It was handled by buyers and sellers. It was torn by hands at the table. Meat and fish brought more obvious challenges. Without modern refrigeration, freshness mattered deeply. Salt, smoke, drying, pickling, and cooking helped preserve food, but time and temperature were always working against people. A fish that smelled acceptable in the morning might be questionable later. Meat had to be used, preserved, or sold quickly. Flies were more than a nuisance. They were part of the food environment. Imagine a warm day near a cooking area. A piece of meat rests on a board. A dog watches from a few steps away. A child is told not to touch. A fly lands, then lifts again. A knife cuts through fat and flesh. Hands wipe themselves on cloth. The scraps are gathered, perhaps for animals, broth, or disposal. Nothing is wasted if it can still serve a purpose. That thrift helped survival, but it also meant scraps, bones, grease, and smells remained part of daily life. Even washing dishes was different. A wooden bowl could absorb smells over time. A pot blackened by fire did not become shining clean after each use. Grease could cling. Soot marked hands. Water used for rinsing might quickly become cloudy. Sand, ash, straw, or rough cloth could help scrub. A dish might be cleaned well enough for the next meal, but not sterilized in any modern sense. Again, the goal was not perfection. It was usability. A bowl that did not smell foul. A pot that could cook again. A knife wiped clean enough. A table scraped. A floor swept after crumbs fell. The medieval kitchen had its own rhythm of making and cleaning. Making and cleaning. Making and cleaning again. Food also attracted life. Mice, rats, flies, beetles, dogs, cats, chickens, children. Anything edible drew attention. Grain storage had to be guarded carefully. Bread had to be protected from dampness and pests. Cheese and meat had to be kept from animals. Herbs might be hung to dry. Salted goods stored where possible. Barrels closed. Baskets covered. Still, no storage method was perfect. A house with food was a house with visitors, wanted and unwanted. Cats were useful for a reason. Dogs watched for scraps for a reason. Containers, hooks, shelves, and storage chests mattered because food could disappear, spoil, or become infested. And then there was the table itself. In many settings, people ate with hands, knives, spoons, trenchers, bowls, and shared vessels. Forks were not a universal, everyday tool in the medieval West. Bread could serve as part of the meal and part of the eating surface. People tore, dipped, lifted, passed, drank, and shared. Manners existed. Rules existed. People were told how to behave at table. Do not be greedy. Do not wipe your hands improperly. Do not put dirty fingers where they should not go. Do not behave like an animal. The very existence of such rules tells us that people cared. They knew eating could become messy. They knew hands mattered. They knew others were watching. At a wealthy table, hand-washing before and after meals might be part of the ritual. Servants might bring water. Cloths might be provided. Seating followed status. Food arrived in order. Manners marked one's place in society. In a poorer home, the meal might be simpler and rougher, but care still existed. A bowl was wiped. Bread was shared. A child's hands might be cleaned. A pot was scraped. Leftovers were saved. Bones might be used for broth. Crumbs brushed aside. Medieval food was not only nourishment. It was labor, economy, status, smell, risk, comfort, and dirt. A warm bowl of pottage on a cold evening could be deeply comforting. Bread dipped into broth could soften the hardship of the day. A little cheese, onion, or ale could make a simple meal feel complete. People enjoyed food. They seasoned it when they could. They celebrated feast days. They valued hospitality. They knew hunger, but also pleasure. Still, every meal left traces. Ash near the hearth. Crumbs in the rushes. Grease on fingers. Smoke in the rafters. A knife to wipe. A pot to scrub. A bowl to rinse. Bones for the dog. Scraps for the pig. Peels for the heap. A table to clear. After eating, the room settles. The fire continues to glow. The smell of food slowly mixes with the older smells of the house. Smoke, wool, damp floor, bodies, animals, and wood. Someone wipes a bowl. Someone licks grease from a finger before remembering to rinse. Someone carries scraps outside. A dog moves closer. A child grows sleepy near the warmth. The meal is over, but it has become part of the house, part of the floor, part of the air, part of the clothing, part of the body. In the modern world, we often imagine cleanliness as separation. Food is sealed from dirt. Kitchens are separated from animals. Waste is hidden. Hands are washed again and again under running water. Surfaces are disinfected. Refrigerators slow decay. Packaging protects ingredients from the street. In the medieval world, food lived more openly, closer to hands, closer to fire, closer to animals, closer to weather, closer to spoilage, closer to the earth. And because of that, eating was not just a clean act of nourishment. It was part of the same constant negotiation with dirt that shaped the entire day. People washed. People wiped. People cooked carefully. People used salt, smoke, heat, and common sense. But the meal still belonged to its world, a smoky, muddy, living world where the simplest bowl of food carried with it the labor of fields, water, fire, hands, animals, and time. And now, as the bowls are cleared and the scraps are taken away, we begin to notice something else moving quietly through every part of medieval life. Animals, not just in the fields, not only in barns, but in streets, homes, yards, markets, kitchens, castles, and sleeping spaces. Useful, familiar, noisy, warm, and endlessly messy. They are waiting in the next chapter, just outside the door. Chapter 9. Animals Everywhere. To understand why medieval life was so difficult to keep clean, we have to remember something very simple. Animals were everywhere, not only in distant fields, not only in barns, not only on farms far away from the town. They were in the lanes, near the doorways, beside the markets, behind the houses, under carts, around kitchens, and sometimes close enough to the sleeping spaces that their sounds became part of the night. A medieval settlement was not a human world with animals neatly placed outside it. It was a shared world. People and animals lived beside each other because they depended on each other. Horses pulled carts, oxen worked fields, cows gave milk, chickens gave eggs, pigs turned scraps into meat, sheep gave wool, goats gave milk and meat, dogs guarded, hunted, and scavenged. Cats controlled mice and rats. Geese made noise, provided feathers, eggs, and meat, and defended their space with surprising confidence. Animals were useful. Animals were valuable. Animals were part of survival. And animals made mess. Imagine stepping out into the lane again after the morning meal. The town is more awake now. A horse stands near a cart, shifting its weight from one hoof to another. Steam rises faintly from its body in the cool air. Its harness creaks. Its tail flicks. Nearby, a pig noses along the edge of the street, searching through straw, scraps, and mud. Chickens scatter around a doorway. A dog follows someone carrying food. A cat slips along a wall, disappearing into shadow. The street belongs to all of them. The ground shows it. Hoof prints fill with water. Pig tracks cross through soft mud. Chicken droppings mark the edge of a yard. Horse dung lies where it fell, warm at first, then cooling, drying, breaking apart, mixing into the street. In dry weather, parts of it become dust. In wet weather, it becomes part of the mud. This is not an occasional accident. It is constant. Every animal that passes through the town leaves something behind. Dung, hair, feathers, fleas, smell, noise, footprints, disturbed straw, scattered scraps, churned mud. The more animals a place has, the more work it takes to keep the human spaces livable. But removing animals was not an option. A horse might be the strength of a household or business. A cow might provide milk. A pig might turn kitchen waste into future food. Chickens might be the difference between having eggs and having none. A dog might protect the yard. A cat might save stored grain from being eaten by mice. The animals made life dirtier. They also made life possible. So people managed them. They built pens, yards, stables, sheds, coops, and byres. They tied animals where they needed to stand. They swept dung into heaps. They used manure for fields. They tried to keep animals away from certain areas and allowed them in others. They understood that animals could spoil food, damage goods, spread fleas, foul floors, and cause trouble. But again, management was not perfection. A pig might escape. A chicken might wander indoors. A dog might nose into food scraps. A horse might leave dung in the street. A cow might be kept close to the house in bad weather. A goat might chew something it should not. Life with animals meant constant small corrections. Move that bucket. Close that gate. Sweep that corner. Push the dog away. Keep the chickens out. Tie the horse there. Carry the dung heap farther from the door. Bring the animal inside because the night is too cold. Then clean again tomorrow. In poorer households, the closeness could be even greater. An animal might be kept in the same building or under the same roof, separated by a wall, partition, or lower section. This could provide warmth and safety, especially in harsh weather. But it also brought smell, insects, dampness, and noise. The warmth of animals came with the reality of animals. Breath, dung, urine, hair, fleas, hooves on the floor, the shifting of bodies in the dark. To modern ears, sleeping close to animals sounds uncomfortable. To many medieval people, it could be practical. Animals were too valuable to leave exposed to theft, cold, or predators. Their warmth mattered. Their survival mattered. Losing an animal could mean hunger, debt, or disaster. So the boundary between clean and dirty bent around necessity. The animal stayed. The floor was swept. The smell remained. Markets made the problem larger. Animals were bought, sold, moved, fed, and slaughtered. A market day could bring extra carts, horses, sheep, chickens, pigs, and people into one crowded area. The ground became churned and fouled. Straw was laid down. Waste gathered. Dogs followed the smell of food. Flies found meat, dung, and scraps. The town's animals were part of its economy, but also part of its dirt. And the dirt did not stay outside. It clung to shoes. It stuck to hems. It marked hands that touched ropes, harnesses, feathers, hides, wool, or buckets. It came into houses on boots, on tools, on baskets, on the bodies of people who had spent the day handling animals. A person who milked a cow, fed pigs, collected eggs, helped with sheep, or cleaned a stable did not return untouched. They carried the animal world with them. The smell of hay, manure, wool, milk, feathers, leather, and sweat followed them indoors. Then the hearth smoke joined it. Then the food smells joined it. Then the damp floor held it. This mixture was medieval life. There were also pests, rats, mice, lice, fleas, flies, and other small creatures that lived where food, animals, straw, and people lived close together. Cats and dogs helped. Traps helped. Cleaning helped. But pests were persistent. Grain attracted them. Bedding hid them. Animals carried them. Warm rooms sheltered them. A clean home could still have fleas. A careful kitchen could still draw mice. A swept floor could still hold insects beneath old rushes. This was not because people wanted pests. It was because the medieval environment gave pests many places to live. Food storage was difficult. Buildings had gaps. Floors were not sealed. Animals were near. Waste did not vanish. Warmth gathered around the hearth, and life in every form found its way in. Yet there is also gentleness in this animal world. A dog sleeping near the fire, a cat curled in straw, chickens murmuring in a yard, a horse breathing softly in the cold morning, a cow shifting in the dark. These were familiar sounds, familiar bodies, familiar presences. People lived with animals not only as tools, but as daily companions of labor and survival. The dirt they brought was ordinary, annoying, certainly, sometimes dangerous, sometimes overwhelming, but ordinary. As evening came, the animals settled. The lanes grew quieter. A horse stamped once. A pig grunted behind a fence. A dog barked at something unseen. Chickens found their roost. Somewhere a cow exhaled in the dark. And in the house, the people inside carried the traces of that shared world. Mud on shoes, straw on clothing, fleas in bedding, milk on a hand, dung scraped from a boot, smoke in the hair. The medieval world was not divided into clean human spaces and dirty animal spaces. It was woven together. And every day, people lived inside that weaving, cleaning what they could, accepting what they had to, and waking the next morning to do it again. Chapter 10. Sickness and Smell. In the medieval world, smell was more than discomfort. Smell could feel like warning. A foul smell in the street, a sour smell from spoiled food, a heavy smell near stagnant water, the smell of rot, sickness, waste, or death. These were not only unpleasant details of daily life. They were signs people noticed, discussed, feared, and tried to avoid. Medieval people did not understand disease in the modern scientific way. They did not know about bacteria and viruses as we do. They could not look through a microscope and see the hidden life moving through water, food, breath, blood, waste, or insects. But they had senses. They had memory. They had experience. They knew that some places felt unhealthy. They knew that rotting things were dangerous. They knew that bad water could be suspicious. They knew that stale air, foul rooms, and corrupted smells seemed connected to illness. They knew that sickness could spread through households, neighborhoods, ships, armies, and towns. Their explanations were different from ours, but their fear was real. One common idea was that bad air could bring sickness. Foul smells, mists, rot, and corruption were often believed to poison the air. This idea did not correctly explain all disease, but it did encourage people to pay attention to cleanliness, ventilation, and odors. A place that smelled foul was not only disgusting, it seemed unsafe. Imagine walking near a blocked channel in a town street. The water moves slowly, if it moves at all. Straw, mud, scraps, animal waste, and household refuse have gathered in it. The air above it is thick and unpleasant. People step around it, wrinkle their noses, lift their hems, and move faster. Someone complains that it should be cleared. Someone else says the smell will bring sickness. They may not know exactly why, but they are not wrong to distrust it. Bad smells often came from bad conditions: decay, waste, spoiled food, stagnant water, crowding, and poor ventilation. Even when the theory was incomplete, the senses were noticing something important. The nose became a tool. It judged food. It judged rooms. It judged streets. It judged bodies. It judged water. A person could smell when meat had gone too far, when fish was not fresh, when a room had been closed too long, when bedding needed airing, when a chamber pot needed emptying, when a sick room had become heavy and stale, when a well or stream seemed wrong. The world spoke through smell, and people listened. Sickness itself changed the atmosphere of a house. Imagine someone ill in a small room, lying under wool and linen near the hearth or in a shared sleeping space. The air is warm, damp, and close. A bowl sits nearby. Cloths are used and reused. Water is brought. Herbs may be prepared. Prayers may be said. People come and go quietly. The fire burns low. The room smells of smoke, sweat, fever, old bedding, and fear. Without modern medicine, illness could turn a household inward. Work slowed. Voices softened. People watched for signs. Was the fever rising? Was the breathing easier? Could the person swallow? Did the room smell worse? Were others beginning to cough? Caregiving created more dirt and more cleaning. Cloths needed washing. Bedding needed airing. Bowls needed rinsing. Floors needed sweeping. Waste needed removal. Hands needed washing, even if not always in the way modern medicine would demand. The sick body required attention, and attention required labor. Water again. Fire again. Cloth again. Time again. In a crowded medieval household, separating the sick from the healthy was not always easy. There might not be extra rooms. Beds might be shared. Family members slept close together. Apprentices, servants, children, and adults could live in the same building. Smoke, breath, insects, bedding, bowls, and touch all moved through shared spaces. A contagious illness could find many paths. People recognized spread, even if imperfectly. They saw that sickness could move from person to person, house to house, or town to town. During major outbreaks, fear could transform daily life. Doors closed. Travelers were watched. Markets changed. Rumors moved quickly. Religious processions, prayers, quarantine-like measures in some places, and desperate attempts to purify air all reflected the need to respond. But even in ordinary times, before great crises, the connection between dirt and sickness was felt in daily habits. Do not drink that water. Do not eat that meat. Clear that waste. Air that bedding. Burn sweet herbs. Wash before eating. Move away from the foul smell. Keep the house from becoming too stale. Some practices helped more than people knew. Some did little. Some were based on ideas that now seem strange, but they show a world trying to protect itself. Smell could also shape ideas of morality and status. A person who smelled clean or of pleasant herbs Smoke in a respectable way, fresh linen or scented water, might seem healthier and more orderly. A person who smelled foul could be judged as poor, sick, careless, sinful, or socially low. This was not always fair. Poverty made cleanliness harder. Hard labor made bodies smell. Illness brought odors people could not control. Yet society often reads smell as character, and the medieval world was no different. Clean air, pleasant scents, and fresh linen were forms of comfort and status. To have a room that did not stink required space, fuel, clean materials, and labor. To have bedding aired, clothing washed, floors swept, herbs scattered, and waste removed meant that someone had done work, or that someone else had done it for you. Health and cleanliness were never separate from class. The poor lived closer to crowded rooms, harder labor, limited water, and shared spaces. The wealthy could create more distance, more rooms, more servants, more linen, more chances to wash, more ways to perfume, air, separate, and remove. But even wealth did not create a modern world. Rich households still had smoke, chamber pots, animals nearby, food spoilage, insects, and disease. A castle or a manor might be grand, but it was still part of the medieval environment. Stone walls could be cold and damp. Large kitchens created heat and waste. Latrines required management. Many people lived and worked close together. No one escaped the age entirely. In towns, the problem of sickness and smell became larger because people gathered densely. More people meant more waste, more animals, more food, more trade, more water needs, more risk from spoiled goods, contaminated sources, and crowded housing. A village might be muddy and smoky, but a town could be intensely layered with human and animal life. The nose could feel overwhelmed, but it could also become trained. A resident knew the ordinary smell of the town and the smell that meant something had changed. A blocked drain, a spoiled barrel, a dead animal, a sick neighbor, a market stall to avoid, a well that no longer seemed safe. Smell was information, and in a world without modern testing, information mattered. As the day moves forward, heat deepens the air. The market smells stronger. Waste softens. Flies grow more active. A sick room becomes warmer. A pot of herbs simmers near a bed. Someone opens a shutter, hoping to let bad air out. Someone else worries that cold air may harm the patient. Every choice is uncertain. The medieval world was full of these uncertainties. Open or closed. Wash or conserve water. Air the bedding or keep warmth inside. Eat the food or throw it away. Trust the well or walk farther. Stay near the sick or keep distance. People made decisions with the knowledge they had, the resources they could reach, and the fears they carried. And when night returned, smells settled again. Smoke thickened under roofs. Streets cooled. Waste remained where it had not been cleared. Sick rooms grew quiet. The town breathed in the dark. For us, looking back, it is easy to focus on how much they did not know. But it is more useful to notice how much they observed. They knew foulness mattered. They knew freshness mattered. They knew air, water, food, bodies, and waste were connected to well-being, even when they could not see the hidden causes. They lived in a world where dirt was not only unpleasant, it could be frightening. And this fear shaped the way they washed, swept, smelled, avoided, prayed, treated, and endured. Chapter 11. Castles were not clean. When we imagine the Middle Ages, we often imagine the castle first. High stone walls, tall towers, banners moving in the wind. A great hall filled with firelight. A lord at the table. Servants moving through shadows. Armor, tapestries, staircases, and the quiet power of stone. From far away, a castle can look clean and solid compared with the muddy village or crowded town. It rises above the landscape. It seems organized, defended, important, and grand. But inside, a castle was still a medieval place, and medieval places were difficult to keep clean. The first thing to remember is that castles were full of people. Not only nobles, but servants, guards, cooks, grooms, stable workers, craftsmen, guests, messengers, priests, children, animals, and laborers. A castle was not just a residence. It was a workplace, storehouse, fortress, administrative center, military position, and symbol of power. People came and went. Food came in. Waste had to go out. Animals needed care. Fires burned. Floors were crossed by muddy feet. The great hall may have looked impressive, but it was not untouched by ordinary dirt. Long tables were set up for meals. Benches were moved. Rushes might cover the floor. Dogs could linger near food. Servants carried dishes through the room. Ale spilled. Bread crumbled. Grease dripped. Bones were discarded. Candles and torches smoked. The hearth or fireplaces added soot to the air. After a feast, the hall needed serious cleaning. Tables had to be cleared. Dishes scraped. Floors swept. Rushes replaced. Dogs pushed away from places they should not be. Leftovers managed. Ash removed. The grander the event, the larger the mess. A castle could display wealth precisely because it had people to handle this labor. Cleanliness at the top was often made possible by work below. Servants swept, carried, scrubbed, emptied, fetched, polished, washed, and removed. The noble household appeared ordered because many hands were constantly fighting disorder. But the disorder always returned. The kitchens were especially intense. A castle kitchen had to feed many people, sometimes in large numbers and under pressure. Fires burned hot, meat was cut, fish prepared, bread stored, cauldrons, spits, knives, boards, baskets, barrels, and tubs filled the space. Smoke, steam, fat, blood, flour, herbs, sweat, and ash mingled in the air. A busy kitchen was not quiet. It roared softly with labor. Water splashed. Knives struck wood. Cooks shouted. Servants hurried. Fire cracked. Dogs waited for scraps. The floor became slippery or dirty. The smell of roasting meat might be pleasant from a distance, but close to the work there were stronger smells. Raw flesh, smoke, grease, damp stone, old wood, waste, and bodies moving quickly in the heat. Food storage brought more challenges. Grain had to be protected from rodents and damp. Meat had to be salted, smoked, cooked, or used before spoiling. Barrels needed inspection. Cheese, ale, wine, flour, onions, herbs, and preserved foods all needed space. A castle might have storerooms, cellars, pantries, and buttery areas, but none of them were magically clean. They required watching, guarding, sweeping, airing, and constant attention. Where there is food, there are pests. Mice, rats, flies, beetles, dogs, cats. Servants used practical methods to manage them, but the castle remained part of the same biological world as the village below. Then there were the latrines. In many castles, garderobes or latrine shafts projected from walls or emptied into pits, moats, or designated areas. From a distance, this may seem like a clever solution. Waste was moved away from the living chamber, down through stone, away from the body. But away did not always mean gone. A shaft could smell, a pit could fill. A moat could become foul. Servants might have to clean or manage waste areas. Cold drafts could move through openings. Flies and odors could return. And in times of siege or crowding, the problem grew worse. A castle under normal conditions was hard enough to maintain. A castle under siege could become a nightmare of crowding, fear, limited water, trapped animals, stored food, sickness, and waste that could not easily be removed. The same walls that protected people could also hold smells, disease, and discomfort inside. Stone gave security. It did not give freshness. Castle rooms could be cold and damp. Thick walls held chill. Windows were smaller than modern ones. Fires warmed unevenly. Smoke could still linger. Tapestries and wall hangings helped reduce drafts and add color, but they also absorbed smells from smoke, bodies, food, and damp air. Bedding, clothing, and cushions needed airing. Straw and rushes needed changing. Floors needed sweeping. A noble chamber might have finer things than a peasant cottage. Better bedding, more linen, a bed with curtains, decorative textiles, perhaps scented herbs, perhaps servants to bring water. But it still did not have modern plumbing, central heating, electric ventilation, or easy laundry. The lady or lord in the castle lived with more comfort, but not with modern cleanliness. Their body still needed water carried by someone. Their chamber pot still needed emptying. Their clothing still absorbed smoke. Their linen still required washing. Their room still needed airing. Their fire still made ash. Their food still came through kitchens filled with labor and mess. A castle also had stables, and stables were never clean in a delicate way. Horses were valuable and essential. They needed feed, water, bedding, grooming, space, and care. They produced dung and urine in large amounts. Stable workers cleaned, carried, brushed, shoveled, and managed the constant animal presence. Straw bedding had to be replaced. Leather tack had to be maintained. Hooves brought mud. Flies gathered. The smell of a castle was not only stone and candle wax. It was horse, smoke, meat, rushes, sweat, damp wool, ale, waste, dogs, wet leather, ash. A castle was a machine of human and animal life, and machines of life are messy. Yet castles also had rituals of order, the hall prepared before a meal, fresh rushes laid down, tables arranged, hands washed, cloths spread, candles lit, rooms swept, chambers decorated, clothing brushed, armor polished, horses groomed, courtyards cleared. These rituals mattered because they turned rough reality into status and ceremony. A castle could appear magnificent. That magnificence took work. Beneath the feast was the kitchen. Beneath the clean tablecloth was the laundry. Beneath the noble chamber was the servant carrying water. Beneath the stone latrine was the waste pit. Beneath the polished image was the same medieval struggle against dirt. This does not make castles less interesting. It makes them more real. Imagine walking through one in the late afternoon. The courtyard is damp from rain. A groom leads a horse toward the stable. A servant crosses with a bucket. Smoke rises from the kitchen. Somewhere, bread is being carried into the hall. Dogs move close to the walls. A guard shifts his weight near the gate. In the great hall, rushes are being arranged before the evening meal. In a chamber above, a window is opened briefly to let out stale air. The castle is alive. Not clean like a museum. Alive like a household, fortress, farmyard, kitchen, barracks, and office all pressed together inside walls. And as evening comes, the fires grow brighter. The stone holds the cold. The smells of cooking and smoke deepen. Servants hurry before the meal. Water is poured for washing hands. Dishes arrive. Voices gather in the hall. For a moment, in the glow of candles and firelight, the castle may look almost golden. But below that golden light is the same earthy truth. Mud at the gate. Ash by the fire. Rushes underfoot. Smoke in the cloth. Waste to remove. Animals to clean. Water to carry. A castle was grand. A castle was powerful. A castle could be beautiful. But a castle was not clean. Not in the way we imagine cleanliness now. It was simply better managed, better staffed, and more carefully staged than the world outside its walls. And even there, behind stone towers and noble banners, medieval dirt found its way in. Chapter 12. A Medieval Night. As the day begins to fade, the medieval world changes again. The dirt does not disappear. The smoke does not leave. The mud does not dry all at once. The animals do not become silent immediately. But everything slows. The town that felt crowded in the morning begins to loosen its grip. Market stalls are cleared. Baskets are lifted. Carts turn toward home. Hooves move more slowly through the lane. A few last voices carry through the evening air, softer now than they were at midday. The light changes first. It gathers low against the walls and roofs, turning timber, stone, straw, and mud into darker shapes. The street loses its sharp edges. The puddles no longer reflect the sky clearly. Doorways become warm squares of firelight. Smoke rises from rooftops in thicker lines as evening meals are prepared and fires are fed for the night. Inside the houses, the hearth becomes important again. It is not only a place for cooking now, it is the center of the evening. People come closer to it because the world beyond the fire is growing cold. The air near the door has a damp edge. The floor feels harder beneath tired feet. Clothing that was wet earlier in the day hangs near the warmth, giving off the smell of damp wool, smoke, sweat, and weather. The room is not fresh, but it is familiar. A pot may still hang above the fire. The last meal of the day may be simple: bread, pottage, ale, cheese, onions, or whatever has been saved, cooked, stretched, and shared. The bowls are not shining, but they are usable. The table is not spotless, but it is cleared enough. Hands are wiped. Scraps are saved for animals or thrown where they will be dealt with later. The work of cleaning does not end because the sun is setting. A floor may be swept once more. A bucket may be carried. A pot may be scraped. Ash may be pushed back toward the hearth. A child may be wiped clean enough for sleep. A cloak may be shaken outside the door. Boots may be scraped against wood, stone, or the edge of the threshold. But evening cleaning is not a grand reset. It is only another small defense against the world. The mud will return tomorrow. The fire will make more ash. The animals will leave more traces. The water bucket will empty again. The floor will collect another day. Still, these little actions matter. They make the room calmer. They make the night more bearable. They tell the body that the working part of the day is almost finished. Outside, the medieval street becomes harder to read. Without electric lamps, darkness belongs to the town quickly. A few lanterns, candles, torches, or open doorways may offer small islands of light, but beyond them the lane is shadow. The same street that was muddy and busy in the morning now feels uncertain. A rut in the ground is harder to see. A puddle becomes a dark patch. A sleeping animal near a wall may be only a shape. The smell of the town changes in the dark. The heat of the day fades, but the old smells remain. Smoke, wet earth, animals, waste, cooking, ale, damp wood, cold stone, stale rushes. Somewhere, a stable gives off the warm breath of horses. Somewhere else, a pig shifts in straw. A dog barks, then stops. The night is not silent. It is simply quieter. There is the creak of wood, the stir of animals, the snap of a fire, the murmur of voices behind walls, the distant sound of a door closing, the soft movement of someone carrying water or checking a gate. In a castle, the night settles differently, but not more cleanly. Stone corridors grow cold. Fires burn in selected rooms, while other spaces fall into darkness. The great hall, after the evening meal, must be cleared again. Rushes hold crumbs and drops of ale. Dogs search for what has been missed. Servants move through the remains of warmth and noise, gathering dishes, scraping boards, carrying away what the noble household has left behind. Above, in private chambers, curtains may be drawn around beds to keep warmth close. A chamber pot waits in the room, practical and unpleasant. A candle burns low. Clothing is removed and laid aside, still carrying smoke, sweat, perfume perhaps, and the smells of the day. Linen, if clean, brings a little comfort. Wool blankets hold warmth, but also the memory of bodies, rooms, and fires. The noble sleeps in more comfort than the peasant, but not in a modern world. The stone is still cold. The air is still smoky. The water was still carried. The waste must still be removed. The bedding must still be aired, washed, beaten, or changed by human hands. In a smaller house, sleep is closer and more crowded. Family members may lie near one another. Children curl into warmth. Someone coughs softly. A dog may rest near the fire. The floor, even if swept, still holds straw, dust, ash, and traces of the day. The roof above is darkened by smoke. The walls breathe cold through tiny openings. The body lowers itself into bedding that may be stuffed with straw, wool, feathers, or simpler materials. It is not perfectly clean. It may hold old smells, small insects, dampness, or the rough texture of ordinary life. But it is rest. And rest matters. A person who has carried water, walked through mud, worked with animals, cooked, cleaned, washed, lifted, swept, bargained, prayed, repaired, and endured the weather, does not require perfection to sleep. They require warmth, enough darkness, enough safety, enough food, enough shelter. The fire is banked low. The room dims. Smoke gathers more slowly now. The last light fades from the cracks around the shutter. Outside, the lane becomes part of the dark. But even in sleep, the dirt of the medieval world remains close. Mud dries on boots. Ash settles near the hearth. A wet cloak steams faintly in the corner. Animals breathe in nearby spaces. The chamber pot waits until morning. The water bucket is low. The rushes on the floor hold the memory of footsteps. The town rests, but it is not reset. Tomorrow will not begin in a clean world. It will begin in the same world, slightly rearranged by the night. The same smoke-darkened beams, the same muddy street, the same well rope, the same animals, the same work of washing, carrying, sweeping, scraping, cooking, airing, and trying again. And perhaps that is one of the quiet truths of medieval life. Cleanliness was not a destination. It was a daily effort that never fully ended. A person could wash their face, but the smoke would return. Sweep the floor, but the mud would return. Clean the bowl, but the meal would return. Air the bedding, but the damp would return. Clear the street, but the animals would return. Heat the water, but the bucket would empty. Still, people did these things, again and again. Not because they expected a perfect world, but because a little order mattered. A little freshness mattered. A little dignity mattered. A clean cloth, a swept floor, a rinsed hand, a warm fire, a dry corner of bedding, a doorway cleared of mud. These were small victories, and in a world this physical, this earthy, this smoky and crowded, small victories were enough to carry people into another day. Chapter 13. Calm Ending. And now, as the medieval night grows deeper, we can begin to let the old world fade. The market is empty. The last cart has passed. The butcher's board is still. The baker's oven cools slowly. The animals have settled into their pens, stables, yards, corners, and shadows. The smoke above the rooftops thins into the dark. Inside the small house, the fire has become a low red glow beneath the ash. It gives little light now, but enough to soften the edges of the room. A wooden bowl rests near the wall. A broom leans where it was left. A cloak hangs near the hearth, still carrying the scent of rain and smoke. The floor is quiet beneath its layer of rushes, straw, dust, and the faint remains of the day. Nothing is perfectly clean, but nothing is moving quickly anymore. The medieval world, so full of work and smells and mud and effort, has finally slowed to the rhythm of sleep. A person lies beneath rough bedding, listening to the soft sounds of the house. The fire shifts. Someone breathes nearby. An animal stirs outside. The wind touches the shutters. Far away, perhaps, a bell marks the hour. There is no bright screen, no humming machine, no sudden electric light. Only darkness, wood, wool, smoke, earth, and the quiet presence of other sleeping bodies. It is easy, from the comfort of the modern world, to look back and see only the dirt. The mud in the lanes, the smoke in the rooms, the animals in the streets, the waste that had to be carried away. the water that had to be fetched, the clothing that held the smell of labor, the food prepared close to fire, hands, flies, and wooden boards, the floors that never stayed clean, the castles that looked grand from a distance, but still held ash, dampness, latrines, kitchens, animals, and endless work. All of that was real. Medieval life was dirtier than most of us can easily imagine. But it was not only dirty, it was also human. People noticed the dirt. They smelled the smoke. They disliked foul water. They cared about clean hands. They valued fresh linen. They swept their floors. They aired their bedding. They washed their faces. They carried water until their arms ached. They heated it with fuel that had taken effort to gather. They cleaned bowls, scrubbed cloth, changed rushes, moved waste, managed animals, and opened shutters to let out stale air. They lived in a world that made cleanliness difficult. And still, they tried. That is what makes the past feel close. Not the kings, not the battles, not the dates carved into history books, but the small daily efforts. The person bending over a basin in the morning, the child with mud on their shoes, the woman wringing water from linen by a stream, the servant carrying a bucket up cold stone steps, the baker brushing flour from his hands, the stable worker scraping mud from a boot, the tired family gathering near the hearth while smoke rises into the rafters, the ordinary body trying to stay warm, respectable, fed, and just clean enough to begin again. Medieval dirt was not one thing. It was many small things. A little ash, a little mud, a little smoke, a little sweat, a little grease, a little dust, a little damp wool, a little straw, a little animal smell, a little old water, a little spilled ale, a little food left in the rushes, a little soot on the hand, each one small. Together, they made the texture of a life closer to the ground than ours, closer to weather, closer to fire, closer to animals, closer to the labor behind every comfort. And perhaps that is why this kind of history is worth hearing slowly, because it reminds us that the past was not only dramatic, it was not only violent, royal, religious, or strange. Much of it was ordinary. People woke up. They washed what they could. They worked. They got dirty. They ate. They cleaned again. They became tired. They slept. And the next morning, the smoke rose once more. So, as we leave the medieval world tonight, imagine one last quiet scene. A narrow lane after midnight. The mud is dark and still. The houses lean close together, their shutters closed. A faint glow remains behind one small window. Somewhere, a horse shifts in its stable. Somewhere, a dog turns in its sleep. The air smells of wet earth, wood smoke, straw, and the remains of the day. Above the rooftops, the sky is wide and black. No engines, no electric signs, no clean glass towers, only the old town resting under the night. Inside one house, the fire is almost out. The floor has been swept, though dust remains. The water bucket is nearly empty. The clothing near the hearth is dry enough for morning. A person sleeps beneath wool, breathing slowly, surrounded by the faint smells of smoke, linen, straw, and home. Tomorrow the work will begin again. The fire will be stirred. The bucket will be lifted. The floor will be crossed. The lane will be muddy. The animals will wake. The town will smell of bread, smoke, dung, ale, sweat, and rain. And somewhere in that ordinary earthy world, someone will wash their hands, straighten their clothing, step carefully through the street, and try once more to live cleanly in a world that never stayed clean for long. For now, though, the day is done. The old house is quiet. The smoke rises gently. The street sleeps, and the muddy, smoky, strangely human world of the Middle Ages fades slowly into darkness.